Yes, it is time for us to gather together in early morning before it's even light in the middle of the year. Phumi points out that I think this is a very good point. We are in the second half of the year already. We played our first 45 minutes. Now we're playing our second 45 minutes, and there's no extra time. That's exactly what's happening this morning. All right, so we've got in the cast and crew this morning, Phumi Mashiko, our regular Thursday. And by the way, Pums, I've got an email you must remind me to read to you just now. It's all for you. Someone's in desperate need of your advice this morning. So we're going to get to that. And Bulelo Tinta and the rest of the team in the studio in Rivonia in Johannesburg. We've got Simpiwe Mtetwa. And we've got Homolemo, who I'll introduce you to tomorrow properly so you can meet him. And then obviously there's all the ancillary people who are all over the place, making sure that we are able to get to you live this morning. And here we are, loud and clear, and so far seemingly quite healthy. I mean, Pums, have you had a test? I don't even know if you've had have you had a COVID test?
No,
not even a test.
Not even a test.
Okay. All right.
I'm a compliant soul, Gareth. I'm a compliant soul. I stay away. I'm staying away from crowded places. It's actually perfect. Like everything that lockdown asks for us is all the stuff I actually really want without
doing it anyway, right? Yeah.
Stay away from crowded places.
Right.
Don't touch people. Wash your hands. I mean.
So Phumi was telling me just before we pressed go on the show this morning that the Jacob Zuma Foundation released a statement last night after midnight. And I wonder why I hadn't heard of this, but even now, even though he's not head of state anymore, as she says, he's still keeping us up until the wee hours of the morning. So what does the former president's foundation have to say, Phumi? Give us the lowdown this morning. For many people, this will be the first they've heard.
First of all, it's a 2-page statement. So it took everything inside of me this morning to read the whole 2 pages.
Well done. Better you than
And I'll give you the summary.
Yes.
First part, he needs time to study the judgment.
Okay.
Where have we heard that before?
Every time.
Second part, he respects the Constitutional Court and gets that he's not above the law, and he's never thought that he was.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Do we believe that?
Third part, he really doesn't understand why DCJ Zondo refuses to step down, because they've got a personal difference, and he doesn't think he can have a fair hearing because it's Zondo. And that whole charade has been set up to be a slaughterhouse where people have unsubstantiated and no evidence for any of the things that they put out there. Number 4, he feels that Kampempe's judgment was emotional and angry.
Oh, okay. All right.
Although he still needs time to study it, right? He still needs time to study it, but he does think that it was emotional and angry.
Delivered in an angry and emotional way, okay?
Of course, because it's a woman, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And number 5, wait for it.
Mafazi. You know how much you respect women. Yeah.
Wait for it. Number 5. Finally.
Yeah.
He actually doesn't care what they said. He dismisses everything that was said.
So after all of that, he still doesn't care. He's not compliant. He's not getting compliant.
No.
Right.
Whatever you've said, guys, I don't care. I'm dizzy.
You've got to admire this guy. He's very consistent. Right? Very consistent.
It's like I want to have my day where people can hear me. I want to have my day in court and people can hear me. And then they're okay, come to court. It's like, I'm not coming.
No, I want to choose the court and I want to choose the judges. And they can't have anything to do with me, even though I was president and I pretty much appoint every judge in the country. So I've been to jail.
I'm not afraid of jail. Like, yeah, you think you can? I'm not afraid of jail.
But
Okay, here, go to jail for 15 months. And easy.
and dizzy. Did you hear what Edward Zuma says? His son.
Over his dead body.
Yeah, he says, over my dead body will you take my father to prison. So I'm thinking, that's like an invitation almost. That's like if I were in law enforcement, I'd be like, sure, I could get to arrest the old man and I can get to take out the younger one. Wow, that sounds like
So
a job for the A team. Ba ba da ba 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 da 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 da. It's just great. Perfect.
Is Edward the Jesus one?
Yeah, Edward is the elder son. You're thinking of Duduzane, who's the polished, very good looking.
No. I'm talking about the Jesus character, the considerable figure.
No, you're thinking now of Kulubus.
No, that's Kulubuse.
Kulubuse
Okay, sorry.
Is Kulubuse okay? I mean, COVID has hit fat people hard. Is Kulubuse all right? Do we know?
Do we care?
No,
Well,
we don't. We don't care.
we
'cause
do.
those people who used to work in his mine are still hoping that he'll come and rescue them and pay them their money that they owed. But of course, he never will. Many of those people are already dead because they've been sick. They haven't had money. They haven't had food. They've been desperate for a long time. But as long as Kulubus is all right.
Luckily it's not over his dead body because that's going to take forever.
Sure.
Yeah, right. I don't know how big Edward is, but getting over Kulubus is going to take forever.
Edward's he's not huge, but he's not the brightest.
He's hefty. He's a hefty boy.
He's like if you sit down and you talk to Duduzile or Duduzane, you're like, well, these two are they're well educated. They're very well groomed. They're definitely like second generation Zumas. They've got all the natural talents of their father and the charm of their father, which is inherent. That's something he had out of the crib, and he's a very charming, very personable man. If you have ever met him, and Pums, I don't know if you have, but I've met him about 3-4 times, and
who Zuma?
Time, Jacob, the
yes.
Cholo,
You can't
what a nice man,
the charm and the he has all of those things. He's charming and he's lovely. In Zulu they say umkita. He's got that person. You know what I'm talking about, Bulelo. He's got that thing.
That's awesome.
And a lot of women want to be with him, and a lot of men want to be him, even at his advantage. Right?
He's wonderful. And very polite. Like you don't know how deep very polite. Like Kosazana. He's got all of those things. He's wonderful.
But he's still a crook.
The very dangerous kind.
You can be all those things. Yeah, exactly. You can be all those things and a terrible, terrible crook, which he is.
That's why conmen. Hey, that's why conmen. That's what it's all about.
I've met Duduzile, the daughter, and Duduzane, the son, a number of times, and I've always found them to be exactly the same level of charm as the father. Only they're also imbued with a very high level of education and polish, which he doesn't have. What he has is like a street smart kind of. Don't underestimate his, in inverted commas here, because people think I'm using the word wrong, but native intelligence. It's like he was born pretty smart. I reckon he's got a very high IQ, Jacob Zuma, but he didn't have a formal education. I mean, he dropped out in standard 6 or something. So where standard 2, yeah. So his children who were educated and also have that very smart, sharp brain, they're ready to take the reins. I mean,
like Gugu. Gugu has
Gugu's
that
also
too.
very clever. Yeah, she's also smart. She's an actress, right?
A producer now, writer producer.
So look, I mean, this and Edward he's a bit of a throwback to the former kind of the previous generation in some ways, because he's much more rough and ready and says all the outrageous things, and he's kind of got a bit of struggle envy and all of that stuff. But what a family! What a family! I mean, listen. So he's
And
not
we're
going.
not even talking about a third of it. We just talked about 4 out of
About
22.
22 kids, so it's nothing. The drop in the ocean. But
22.
he says he's not going to jail, huh? He's not going to go. Not going to comply. He's basically giving us the middle finger again.
Sure, Los.
Yeah, that's,
You have to admire the consistency, or rather the inconsistency, the consistent inconsistency.
The temerity. The man, the temerity of this guy.
Balls,
You know what I've always, that's it. I think the cajones is what we really, I mean, imagine the amount of pressure and ridicule and relentless coverage, people, all of that. And the man is still standing. Like, I think a lesser person would have cracked under the pressure. Just the pressure. Just the everybody, like the marches against you, the constant, the case against case, the media's left, right, and people, every single one of these things. It's like water off a duck's back with this guy. He can still laugh, he can still dance, he seems
okay. You can
astounding to me.
Sentencing him to jail at his advanced age, and he still seems as tough as nails. You do admire that. I mean,
it's unbelievable for me. Unbelievable for me. He just he hasn't lost weight. He hasn't gone gray. He's still just
hair anyway to start with. So
no, but I mean, that gray where your skin has actually lost color, where your skin has lost color, where you can see this person's not sleeping, not eating well, none of that shit.
Well, let's go to the comments this morning. Informal Report says, wow, the last time I was this early, Gareth was still a judge on Idols. Good vibe. Yes, welcome back, Informal Reports. Welcome. And then there are lots of people talking about how freezing cold it is in Cape Town. And Cape Town has been horrible this week. There's been wind and rain and even lightning and thunder I saw this morning. People posting that you don't get lightning and thunder in Cape Town usually. So that's quite something. Well done, Cape Town. Oh, very nice. Apparently, Marianne Tum, a journalist that I like very much, who has written some incredible stuff. She says, this is according to Tracy, the best day that she's ever had was when Mandela was released. The other best day was when Zuma was sent to prison. Well, don't count your chickens, Marianne. I mean, it hasn't happened yet. It might still happen. Jenny says, we are the republic of no consequences. Yeah.
That's
the
true.
thing I'm worried about.
Yeah.
So Oki is pointing out here that the former Zambian president's funeral is on Friday. Zuma is scheduled to attend the funeral and was expected to arrive in Lusaka on Thursday. He has until Monday to hand himself over to police. Ooh, sounds exciting. You think he could try and gap it? Would he do that?
Ed will stay in Zambia.
Well, I mean,
he's lived there before.
He's been there before, during the struggle. He was based in Zambia. He was based in Lusaka, so he knows people there. If he needed to make a quick escape, I wonder if they're all still alive, that network. He could probably make a run for it.
You know what? Black people won't miss a funeral for anything. So he'd probably just say, hey, Buffett, okay, I'll do this jail thing, but busy Thursday. Friday, ngiyabuya, Buffett. This is going to be an interesting one.
I'm excited to see what happens. I mean, I'm not excited like all those people who were like lighting cigars and cracking champagne open. It's of no consequence to me whether he goes to jail or not. The damage he's done to the country is something we've all felt for 10 years. So it's not a personal. I don't feel any like personal joy. I got this message from someone the other day, and this is weird. This person I met once or twice. They're like, "Oh, aren't you happy about Zuma being sentenced?" I'm like, I didn't really have a personal relationship with him. And I don't see why anyone would be excited about someone else going to jail, except, of course, if you'd lost a family member and it was a murder trial or something like that. Then you would have, personal reason to feel
some way.
that justice was done. But first of all, he hasn't gone to jail yet, so I wouldn't celebrate too soon. Count your chickens before they're hatched. Second of all, I don't gain any personal satisfaction knowing that Jacob Zuma is going to be in jail. It doesn't make the country a better place. The damage is done, right?
What it tells you is how much these people have invested in sort of the political landscape and sort of extrinsic factors.
Or
it's
in the justice system.
Or whatever it may be. Like, what's happening in your life that you have this much time to invest in Jacob Zuma? Like, as much as obviously that does affect you at some level when he's corrupt, because
I don't think I've posted a single thing on social media about Jacob Zuma, and people were like asking me to, and I don't know, I don't really have anything to say. I mean, it's all out there, and plus, you don't want to be one of those people who's a legal expert now, like everybody was about COVID.
LLB Twitter.
Oh, big time. And remember when the Oscar Pistorius trial, you had people running around using terms like dolus eventualis, and they were not lawyers. I was like, oh, guys, can we just remember dolus eventualis? And now you've got people running around saying, like I complained about yesterday, the PCR test isn't 100% accurate because X, Y, and Z, and if you do the antigen test, this is. I'm like, I don't see the MBCHB after your name, but okay.
Yeah. I've told you my rule. Unless you've got an undergrad in science, I refuse to talk to people about science anymore, because this is the malarkey you're talking about. And I just say, who raised you?
Same goes for law.
Who raised you?
Who raised you?
So, Carl,
yes.
Carl Dos Santos,
Mm.
which again was early hours of this morning, American Twitter going apeshit about it.
Bill
And
Cosby's conviction for
released a statement.
Yeah, Bill Cosby's conviction for sexual assault was overturned by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. His prosecution was a key moment in the Me Too movement. Now, this means he was sent to jail, and he's appealed
for 2 years.
For 2 years, and it's been overturned. So this is really.
He was set free. He was set free yesterday.
Correct.
But I want you to know he's 83 years old. 83 years old, and he sat in prison for 2 years.
Well, Sia and I used to joke about how the wife, who had distanced herself from him, remember, she wasn't taking his calls. She was justifiably like trying to get out of that ugly and grim shadow. Well, I wonder how she's feeling now, because I'm here knocking on the door. Why aren't you opening the door? I've come home after all this time. What's going on there?
That's a damn good impersonation, Gary.
Shame. What a horrible life. I mean, 84 years old, you spent 2 years in prison, you're going blind. You've been accused of all the worst things, which you probably did, but the courts overturned that verdict. Who knows? It's just ugly, right? It's so ugly. I wonder how
hectic.
All the Me Too movement people are feeling right now, because that's fallen apart too, right?
See, that is so because now what stops people wonder? Weinstein next, maybe. I mean, who else gets overturned? And
right.
Hey, OJ bounced back, and the glove didn't fit.
Hey, Twitter world.
Yeah. Well, this just proves again, Twitter is not the real world, and Twitter doesn't care what happens.
And listen, I love OJ's tweets.
That's a tip to OJ.
Hey, Twitter world.
And he's always on the golf course.
If I had done it, I would have done it this way. Horrible.
OJ, he's the Msholozi of America. He did not a single stuff given.
So Carl, the same Carl who just reminded us about Bill Cosby, says, Gareth, don't act cool. It is exciting that Zuma's been sentenced. It marks a great time in our democracy. Your nonchalance isn't cool. I'm not being nonchalant about the finding. I just don't have anything to add, Carl. And I'm not going to be jumping up and down going, yay, yay, he's been sentenced, because I don't believe he's going to go to jail. There's going to be medical parole, or he's going to do something's going to happen. So I'm not getting excited for nothing.
Yeah,
Sorry.
He's going to get the Shabir shakes, and then we know what that means.
Well, they're already probably talking to each other. Shabir, what is this thing that you have?
What did you say?
They've already booked
the same treatment. Hospital bed.
Or do you
Rather
think
than-
he's gonna pull? Or do you think he's gonna pull? What's the guy who's a lot like Elvis Presley now? The one who's dead, but we're not sure.
who?
Jack Ma?
No, man. He
Jeffrey
was
Epstein?
also at the commission. No, he was at the commission, and then he was in a car accident. Car
Oh,
accident.
Greasy.
Yeah.
Agreed. No, Agreetzi wasn't
Not
the one.
a greasy.
Gavin
What?
Gavin Watson.
Dead.
So, are we gonna have a Gavin Watson experience?
Nobody knows.
This is
Nobody
Helen.
knows.
Look, I agree with Carl, right? That it's exciting times ahead. There's so many possibilities, and whatever happens, it's gonna be wow. It's gonna be wow to watch.
It's good to
Owen.
restore our faith in the.
This is how Bill Cosby gets home. Camille, I'm home, honey. Get me some Jello pudding pops.
Oh my God.
That's right.
Oh,
There we
South
go.
African. Incredible.
Informal report says, what specifically did Zuma do to damage South Africa? Was it the economy or something else? Can Gareth elaborate? You have got to be kidding me. Pumi, do you want to field this one?
So
I don't know how to answer. I don't even know where to begin to answer that. That's like his informal reports, who says they've only just joined us now and for the first time since I was on Idols. Have you been in
does
a coma?
that also mean that for all this time you've not read the paper, watched TV, been on Twitter, listened to the radio? There's, dude, you got some reading cut out for you.
Yeah, please help us here. Jesus.
Yeah,
I don't know where to start with that informal reports. I'm not being rude to you. I just honestly, like, you could.
Too much time has gone by. Too many things have happened.
This is like
Too
someone
much has
asking you,
happened.
You know, how can you be sure that the Earth has an axis and that it spins on the axis? I mean, I thought the seasons were established fact by now. That's the kind of argument we're having here. It's like this man and his network of patronage have reduced the country to the state of disaster that we're in at the moment. I would say not all, but close to 80% of our problems in South Africa are as a direct result of appointments and decisions made during the Zuma administration. I'm not saying it was just him. There was a whole cabal around him who made it happen too. It was the Guptas, it was Ace, it was Didi Mabuza, it was Supramahumapelo. It was this coalition that formed around him after Polokwane, and who continued to push in all the wrong directions. He hollowed out state architecture like the NSA, the Scorpions, and then eventually the Hawks. He ruined the National Prosecuting Authority's ability to do its job. He weakened the judiciary. He got into situations where his word was the law. You've got to admire the fact that he led the ANC, which they're not being led at the moment, but he made decisions, even if they were the wrong decisions. And those decisions have all manifested themselves in our lives today, where we are in a severely weakened country, where there is a hugely dependent welfare state. There's not enough tax income. He cleaned SARS up as well in terms of making it ineffectual. He put people like Tom Moyane and Des van Rooyen, and I mean, you go through the names. It's just we're going to be here all day. Zwane, you remember all these people who are in front of the State Capture Commission at the moment are all Zuma appointments. So I think
there's an entire commission happening around all that time.
So informal reports, not South African. My apologies, guys. Thanks for clarifying. Okay, that explains it. But you know, that's
Sorry,
the short.
Yeah, I have a problem with just one thing you said there, was that it's not all his fault. That is nonsense. It is all his fault. We have to take responsibility in life. We must take the buck in life must.
But that's simplistic, Bulelo. That's so simplistic.
Why do you think it's all his fault, Bulelo?
You know what? You know what's interesting is in a business, when the CEO gets fired, nobody says, "Oh yeah, but your middle management might have." The CEO takes the heat. If you sit in that seat, I don't want to get interested in the long grass, and ultimately the buck must stop somewhere. Otherwise, we get what we have in this country where, it's so important to have that is the buck stops here regardless, and you can't claim that you don't know.
I agree.
So the CEO does take the fall, but what usually happens is that the next person that comes into that role, the first thing they do is a cleanup and get rid of all that middle management. So really,
that hasn't happened.
That's the thing. That's the thing is that.
And the reason for that is because they want to take all the responsibility. Because I'm not going to get fired for Zuma's people. Let's just say I was in a company and Gareth was the CEO. He gets fired for whatever. I bring in all of my people because I know in the end, should things happen, I don't want to be blaming Gareth's people. I hire my people so that all of that's happening is my fault.
I mean, Tracy says you're as good as the people you appoint, which is also true.
Amen.
Yeah. Mbulelo, you and I have no argument about the fact that there has to be accountability, right? And my problem is just that it's very convenient for so many other people who are appearing in front of the Zondo Commission and other people who have found themselves with their hands in the till, for those people to go, but get released. You know,
no, then you and Phumi have the point there. I agree. I agree there.
Nico says there's a new name for Carl Niehaus. He's now called Mr. Rent. Oh my God. All right. Things to get to. Do you want to do some headlines? Because we do have the burning platform coming up a bit later on. So I don't want you to
headlines.
But let's look at one or two things, right? I mean, it's worth paying a little bit of attention, even if you don't have to pay a lot. Okay, so first things first. Oh my God, it is the first today. Speaking of first things first, right? First things first.
Yes, it is.
We must play Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Is that what you want? I can make that happen. I can absolutely make that happen. All right. Yes, what is it, Mbulelo?
Is it a new cycle? Like, what is it, like Sagittarius or Pisces or whatever? You know, it's like a new month.
It's never a new cycle on the 1st. The cycles change around the 20-something, 25th or something like that.
Which one is in retrograde? That's what I always need to know.
Mercury at all times.
Is it always Mercury?
Yeah, Mercury is angry, angry.
Okay. All right, so let's look at some mercurial. That's the word. That's the word that we want to look at. I don't know about this. First of all, do you guys know that, I mean, it's the end of Pride Month, and I just want to talk about this very briefly because it is kind of a headline. It's one of those bigger issue headlines. Mbulelo, I know you feel quite strongly about this too. I don't believe anyone should get a whole month of celebrations just for either a lifestyle choice or for being born that way or whatever it might be. I don't think there should be a whole month for anyone. I don't mind a Women's Day, or I don't mind a day for this, a day for the day for tuberculosis sufferers, a day for, because every day there's 5-10 things on every given day if you look at the calendar for everybody. But this thing about having a whole month and having to make everything rainbow colored now, and all the corporations fall into line and do this stuff, even though we know they don't really care. They're just ticking the boxes. Do we really need to make such a fuss of all this shit? What's your feeling on it first? And then I want to hear what Phumi says about it.
Nobody deserves a month. I'm sorry. Who are you that you deserve a 12th of the calendar? Do me
especially just for being, favor. Right? Especially just for being.
Being born is not special. I cannot handle this. Like Pride Month. Do me a favor. I mean, what? Men's Month. No. There is no human being, from the great Nelson Mandela to Oprah to, I don't know, whoever you admire. Sure. I mean, even Jesus only gets 2 days a year. And I mean, his book has been thumping the charts for 2,000 years. So who are we?
Good point.
Like, who are these people that think a month should be devoted to them? A 12th of the Grecian calendar. It's actually so disgusting. Get over yourselves. I'm furious. Absolutely furious.
No, I disagree. I think they could do it if they wanted to. They could do it every single bloody day. What I disagree with is the performance around it, the people who actually don't really care, aren't really interested, and aren't even paying attention to whatever the issues are, and they then decide that for this 1 month we're actually going to look at you, we're going to look at you, we're going to nod to you, we're going to that's what I disagree with, is the performance.
It's so patronizing.
If I think
means nothing, right? It means nothing to most of the people who are making a fuss of it. And frankly, I don't think you should ever be proud just for being. Like, that's not enough. You actually should achieve something if you want me to take pride seriously. And this is not an attack on gay
What
pride
I-
or anything else. I think
what
you've
I
got to
absolutely
have
love,
achieved something, right?
what I absolutely love about any of the people who hold up any kind of special days of remembrance is the fact that they force us to be aware of the things that worry them, the things that irritate them, the things that endanger them. That for me is quite something. And which is why I say, if they wanted to do it every single day for 365 days in a year, let them fucking do it. Let them do it. But the performance of, okay, now I'm gonna change my status to be rainbow colored. I'm putting up a flag. I'm with you, yay.
I'm going to change our company logo.
With you, yay. Like, that's
really,
bullshit.
What we should all be doing, I know this is going to get huge numbers of people very pissed off, but we should all be celebrating straight people, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. Just saying.
Yeah. No, listen, well said. Well said. Reproduction. It's an all-timer.
Reproduction is kind of important to the survival of the species, if you don't mind my saying.
No,
I think kudos and bravo. I think to actually say, especially for people who are
Isn't pride one of
looked at
pride is one of
like strangely, like, you look but you look away, you kind of like,
yeah. No, I know what you mean.
I'm so uncomfortable. I'm not sure, is that
Rather-
person gonna hit on me
say-
and my
rather
fragile
say-
masculinity?
I agree. That's stupid. And I know what you're saying here. That's absolutely right. But pride,
Yeah.
the word pride, isn't that one of the deadly sins? Like, it's something we shouldn't, according to God anyway, we shouldn't be full of pride. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think it's
And they
something
just say
like that.
pride comes before a fall. So that
Before
all
the
the
fall.
all the philosophies warn us against pride. But I think that gay people have fought a long fight, and they deserve some accolades for the fact that finally society is giving them the treatment that they deserve, just as fellow human beings, and that their choices and that their nature in the world today is acceptable and embraced and is loved. I think that's fine. But a whole month
In
I
a
don't-
lot of places, in a lot of places, it remains that performance.
Yeah.
And in South Africa, we have daily, within queer circles, people who have been killed, people who have been attacked, people who have been maimed,
but then-
because of that, I think it is incredibly important that we are forced to reckon with
But there
with
are
the-
also
with
like our
the
law treats
lifestyles.
our law treats everyone equally, and that's the most you can ever expect from the state. You can't expect the state to stop horrible people from murdering people. That's going to happen in any country, right? And they're going to
Absolutely.
be horrible homophobic people in the world, and there's nothing we can do about that. But my point is, you just brought it up yesterday, Mbulelo. Like, if you go to Hungary, and if Mbulelo and I hold hands in the street in Hungary, they'll take us to jail.
Yeah.
And that's a supposedly civilized country. Saudi Arabia, you'll be thrown off a building. So we've got to also accept that we've come quite a long way, and that's worth celebrating. So if that's what we're going to do with pride, that's great. But again, I have to say, a whole month. Must we have months for these things? Can't we just do a day? Then it can be
Nobody.
focused, concentrated. Yeah. Phumi says no. She doesn't mind if it's every day of the year.
Yeah,
Mbulelo
every
and I
damn day if they want to.
parsimonious. We're a bit more parsimonious with our days and our months.
I am.
Yeah.
You know what it is the reason I'm happy to have a go at something like this is that a lot of the performative stuff, as Phumi has articulately said, is actually the game of the uber rich kids in Rosebank sitting in air-conditioned offices. Poor people, that they constantly on the ground moving this kind of thing forward and, like you say, doing it every day and not performing. It's these. I think it's because it's these rich kids who don't want to do like real work, and they go to NGOs and they all sit around at meetings.
It's an easy way to just grab a whole bunch of virtue points for yourself, is by like making your avatar, a pride color, or the pride flag colors or whatever. That's such an easy way to just grab a whole lot of virtue when you've done nothing to earn it. And I do believe that you have to, if you celebrate pride in something, like you take pride in a job well done, you take pride in having cleaned up your mess, you take pride in having created an opportunity for someone else. Those are the things you must take pride in. I think that it should be called matter of fact, gay matter of fact day. Like, people have just got to get over the fact that there are going to be, and there have always been, gay, bi, lesbian, transgender people, and I think that's worth celebrating. I do think it's but pride is not the right word, and maybe that's what the problem is. Maybe we're digging deep here and we've actually discovered something. I don't know. A lot of people will disagree with us.
Listen, quite frankly, your identity politic is actually not that interesting. Black man, white man, Jewish woman, quite frankly, it is not interesting. Are you a decent human being? Do you have respect? Otherwise, get out.
On that note, we're going to talk about the role of race in South Africa in the Burning Platform this morning. So that's going to be heated, as always, because there's a campaign going on at the moment. They've done a couple of surveys across the country, and we're going to find out whether people are actually as obsessed with race as Twitter is. And I think you'll be surprised by the answer, or not, depending on whether or not you're the sort of person who pays attention. Dogozo says, I've got no beef with Pride or anyone else's month. The performance is great for awareness. There's another good point. I don't think that that's necessarily objectionable. Lang says, can we just have our month, please? You get the rest. All right, fine.
Well, is Lang saying pride?
Obviously, Lang says that Lang is obviously gay and wants his or her or their month. So Zandi says, what about Black History Month? Well, ain't it typical of the man that they gave the blacks the shortest month in the year?
True that. I was going to say. You know what I thought?
Always.
What should happen is black people and the gays should come together and go, now, we've got a short month. Could we maybe get...
Intersectionalism didn't work so well.
No, what I meant, could black people not get 2 days of Pride Month, because every 4 months or every 4 years, every leap year, we get that 20. Yeah, not 31 days, Buffett.
I've got you. All right.
I mean,
go ahead, Pums.
Celebrating, and I see this, Tracy saying, can't everybody get just 1 day to celebrate whatever they want? Like in my world, July is like Phumi month, because it's yeah. So like all month, everybody around me, we're like celebrating. My birthday's in July. So like, I get it, right? I get why in my world, and everybody around me properly understands. You wake up in the morning and people are like, it's July,
Yeah.
I think it's like that. I think Pride's a bit like that too. It's like a
happy Phumi month. Must we all change our avatars to? You got colors that you'd like us to change them to for the next month?
I'll think about this one. I'll let you know.
All right, I'm going to breeze through this very quickly. So there are a couple of headlines. We've recorded 383 more COVID deaths and 19,506 new cases in just the last little while. So that would be of concern to some people. Busisiwe Mkhwebane says she agrees with the minority decision in the Jacob Zuma.
Of course she does. Which no. I must say that if you read it, you know what though, that minority judgment is, and all of it, I think both Kampepe, the majority and the minority, to read those two judgments, guys, is actually so wonderful to be able to, and we always talk about this, Gareth, that these guys have sat there and and debated this thing and thought about it and applied themselves. And they can come to a point where they say, so this is what the majority say, but this is what we also think about it. This is something to think about,
And it's
because
important to hear that. It's important to hear their reasoning. I mean, that's why we pay them to sit in the Constitutional Court. That's why they're appointed in the first place. These are smart people who we require to take these situations seriously.
Bona, also because like the Constitutional Court is a big and heavy thing and a hefty thing, and it's about more than just these two people or these two organizations or are in this particular argument. It actually has a bearing on everything else.
Just one other point on this is that Judge Zondo yesterday, in an unconventional statement, also said, it hasn't been easy, but I would do it again in terms of running the commission. He said he's had death threats. His family have had death threats. It's been a very unhappy situation for him. He hasn't enjoyed any part of it, which is a very uncommon thing for a judge to do. You know, usually judges are stoic and keep themselves and they don't let their feelings show. But I think he probably couldn't help it after all the attacks against him. And then there's one other headline, Municipal Horror Stories, How Billions in Taxpayers' Money Are Being Wasted. That, of course, relating to the Auditor General report into municipal finances, a grim picture of collapse and mismanagement across South Africa. Only, I think, 4 or 5 of our municipalities are actually solvent and have a clean report. Only 4 or 5, as I understand it. That's really devastating. It means, you know, that if there are 100 municipalities in the country, and there are many more, that 96% of them are anarchic. So what do we need government for? I keep saying this every time these come out.
Earlier we were speaking about what exactly is it that Jacob Zuma has done. This is the, you know, unintended consequence of having an administration at the top that is so reckless with people's money.
Or maybe it's the intended consequence.
And then I don't think it's the intended consequence. I think it really is an unintended consequence, because what happens is, as they say, a fish rots from the head, is that it trickles down, you know, so everybody down the chain kind of goes, oh, look what those guys are doing. I can do it too. In their little world, they also see an opportunity to have a little bit of it's just a little bit of corruption, you know. It's not those billions. It's just this little like million here next to me, you know. That's what happens. Is it becomes a way of being.
I want to turn our attention to something very much more important than any of these headlines, Phumi. There's someone called Snai who wants to know your advice. Dear Phumi, since you are a Ragadi, I'm sure you have nieces and nephews that come to visit you sometimes. How do you deal with family that sleeps over and messes up your way of keeping things in the house? My brother, his wife and daughter moved into my house in April after my sister-in-law got a job here in Cape Town. I've been enjoying having them in my house, which is nice because I often feel suffocated after a few days of visitors. This time around, I haven't been feeling like my space is crowded, but I do get annoyed by how untidy my house gets in the common areas like the kitchen, the living room, and the main bathroom during the day. I love keeping everything in my house organized. It makes me feel good when my space is neat and tidy. All right. My sister-in-law is not the tidiest person on earth. And to top it off, there's a 2-year-old in the picture who creates a mess all the time. For me, I can see, just from your facial expression. I've now got into the habit of cleaning up the house every night when my brother and his family go to bed. Unfortunately, they don't seem to be getting the hints. Here's why. Number 1, they leave the cushions on the sofa lying around after sitting on them. This tears a piece of my heart out every day, says Snai. My kitchen counters always have breadcrumbs, spilt liquid, or cups lying around. Another piece of my heart torn. There's always water in the kitchen sink and splashes of grease around the stove. I don't get this because when I was growing up, my Ragadi used to say, Nkomazana must always carry a wet cloth in her hand while cooking to wipe anything that spills out. How did my sister-in-law miss this? I thought this was general black household teaching. Number 4, I keep my condiments and spices in separate shelves in my pantry. Since I moved here, I always find the salt or aromat lying around on the wrong shelf, cooking oil dripping from the bottle. When they go to bed, They leave chargers plugged in on the wall, cables hanging from the plugs, and the switches left on, but nothing charging. Now I'm just crying, says Snae.
Oh.
These are just 5 of the things that I found painful to deal with, but I suffer in silence because I have to be accommodating. I'm thinking of stopping offering my place to people for sleepovers and limiting it to a number of hours because I love hosting people, but I love keeping my house tidy much more. Is this a terrible idea? This is a very, very
Who's
heartfelt.
this angel?
Oh,
Who is this angel? Is it a man or a woman? If you're a woman, perhaps it's my time to get married.
This is Snae, and
Oh.
Phumi, what advice do you have here? This is Rahati advice.
Snae, first of all, you must know you don't have to do anything but stay black and die. Even the stay black is a little,
you don't have to say it,
you know.
Yeah.
Everything else, you don't gotta do, girl. You don't gotta do. You just don't suffer in silence. You know, don't, because like you think people are gonna take a hint. Yeah, they won't take a hint. You must be straightforward. You must be straight. You must be straight with them. You must be like, listen, this is not how we roll around these parts.
Especially Phumi, because people will take as much as you give them, and then they'll see that as the default. So they stop.
And if you don't say,
that's just what they're entitled to.
If you don't say it, they don't know that's how you feel. Don't suffer in silence, girl. You gotta tell them. Like the 2-year-old is a thing, right? It's tricky. But here's the nice thing about 2-year-olds is they're like a blank canvas. You can mold them into not being nasty and dirty little things, right? You can be that person. So people must know how to behave around you. And the only way people are going to know how to behave around you is if you tell them, oh, Snae, don't be that girl. Also, you must set a time frame. They must move out. Dangita, she's got a job.
Yeah.
They must find their own place.
I was going to say.
She's got a job. They must find their own place now.
I do. Plus, there's 2 jobs there.
For me, you can help me understand this. I mean, I've heard a number of times and people have explained to me the black tax, and it's a real thing, okay? But there are also a whole bunch of people who hop on board and who are really just parasites. And that is not a fair tax on anybody. There are a lot of people who are taking huge advantage of other people, and a lot of them aren't even trying anymore. They see their family or their friends as a welfare state, inside a welfare state. So I don't think that any of this is abusive. That's what it is. And even though Snae's email is much more like sweet and gentle and a lot less serious.
Which is why she's getting stomped on, right? Because she's sweet and gentle.
There are a lot of people who are being taken serious advantage of in many different places. You know, the old people are staying in the one room and the young people are staying in another room. And then the breadwinner is busy working themselves to death to keep everybody fed and clothed and warm. And that's not right.
Yeah. So here's an unpopular opinion, and I often get like backlash for this. I don't like or believe in the term black tax. I think it is putting a negative connotation on something that is not necessarily confined to just Black people all over the world. Developing communities, that's how they operate. Those who step up and step out bring along with them everybody else. So it's not what happens to Black people and only to Black people. I think if you speak to Italian Americans, if you speak to Greek people, if you speak to anywhere around the world, developing
Indian families, that happens too.
Indian families, migrants, people who move into that's just how it is. So this putting this negative connotation on like, oh, it's black tax. It happens to everyone, and there are lots of little things that you have to think about as a society, as a community, as family. But it doesn't mean that you can't have boundaries.
Absolutely,
you can't have boundaries around what you can and cannot do, what you are willing to accept and what you are not willing to accept.
I have the Gareth tax, which means that if you've spent more than 2 nights at my house, you literally get thrown out. Yeah, you get that on the street. And it's not just me. Dogozo agrees. Dogozo's rule is I don't allow anyone to stay at my place for more than 2 days for those reasons. I moved out of my dad's house when he married a woman that had kids that just refused to follow our rules. See?
Yeah, listen.
I don't know who you are. You could be one of my best friends in the whole world. You could be visiting South Africa, as a friend of mine recently did. He had to come out here because his stepdad died, and he left his family back in Texas, and he stayed here for one night. And I appreciate that. Like, I get to see him for a night. We get to catch up. We get to spend a whole lot of time talking shit. And then the next day he has stuff to do and he gets out of the way. And I think 2 days at a push. And beyond that, my grandmother, who was from Jamaica, she used to say, come see me is one thing. Come live with me is another.
No, well said. Plus, there's Airbnb now, so I don't know what people are doing. But on the boundaries thing, it's really, really important. It's really, really important because the way I always say it before the show, Gareth, you were saying I inherited my father's unpleasantness as a person. I'm like my aunt. I said, damn right I did.
Father, don't drag me into an argument with your very militant family.
Oh, no, you're damn right I did. You're damn right I did. But I think one of the things is that I always say to people, look here, I'm going to make some things clear to you. I'm going to set the boundaries, not for my sake, because I already know what I will tolerate. I'm setting it for you. So you know that you don't cross, and we don't need to negotiate. Oh, I didn't know, or whatever. So the boundaries are often, people often think the boundaries are for you. I always say, no, I know what I'll tolerate. The boundaries are for you. Because people are self-centered, right? And just on that great point that Phumi made was that the giver must always set the limits because the taker never will. The giver must always set the limits. This idea that people are going to think of you is mental. So the giver must always, limits are imperative. And I'm going through a situation with my mother now because she just can't stop giving money to people and she's retiring. I've told her, listen, it's done. Nobody gets a cent from you anymore. You've put 17 of us through university and high school and whatever. No, thank you. It's done now. And people are not happy in my family. But I've, as of the end of last year, I've made an executive call. Nobody gets a cent from this woman until she becomes worm food. It's over. Sorry, the NGO's closed. It's over.
That's very important because, the last thing you want is for her to never enjoy her own life as a result of having to care for everyone else. Plus, there are so many people in this country who are so selfless. There's so many people in the world who are so selfless. They'll keep giving until they don't even have the sustenance to stay alive themselves. And that's not good. Remember also, you can only give, when your cup is empty, there's no point pretending that you can give other people anything. Your cup has to be at least half full. Otherwise, you can't help other people, no matter who you are. All right, let's move on because we've got to get to the burning platform, which is just moments away. Very excited about this morning's burning platform, and we've got lots to do. We've got 2 guests joining Phumi and I, and I'm excited to get into some of the big issues, including the obvious story of the week, which is Jacob Zuma's being arrested. We're going to speak not only to Phumi, but Chris Fisher, and then later on to Gabriel Crouse as well. So there's going to be a busy hour in the burning platform brought to you by Nando's. That's coming up next. CliffCentral.com on a Thursday morning.
This week on Auto Central, I think the biggest worry in an EV is really the battery.
Yeah.
Like we're not far enough down the road in the world to really know what the future of the batteries are, because lithium ion does deteriorate over time.
But there's new technology that's kind of facilitating that as well.
It's moving all the time. Catch Auto Central, SA's #1 motoring podcast, every Monday at 9 a.m.
Enjoy a great economic quarter with Nando's. Reduce wasteful spending by ordering a meal that's too good to waste. Get the quarter chicken with any single side for only 49 Rand. Nando's. Fire it up.
Yes, indeed. Nando's fires it up with us this morning, and the Burning Platform, which is brought to you by Nando's, is going to be super hot today because we've got so many things to get through, and there's a lot happening in this country of ours. At the moment, we'll also cast our eyes internationally for a little bit, and we'll get into the very, very touchy and difficult issue of race, which can never be discussed enough, it seems, in South Africa. I'm joined, as always, by Phumi Mashiko, who is part of the Burning Platform, like milk is part of tea. That's how I see it. And this morning we also have two other guests. We're also joined at the beginning of the show this morning by Chris Fisher, who's a legal researcher at the Helen Suzman Foundation, which was founded back in 1993 to honor the life's work of Helen Suzman. Christopher, good morning. How are you?
Good, thanks. And you, Gareth?
Very good. You're a little bit soft there. I don't know if we can boost your sound just a little bit. There we are. That's probably a bit better. So, Chris, there's nothing you could do, but maybe there's something we can do here. So I'll try and do that on our side. So, first of all, Chris, do you want to just give us what the official Helen Suzman Foundation response is to Jacob Zuma being arrested? Because I think a lot of people are interested in what you guys might think of this. As an NGO, you've been at the forefront at the Helen Suzman Foundation of fighting for civil liberties, fighting for justice, making sure that the law is applied equally to all South Africans. Phumi and I started the show this morning talking about Jacob Zuma, but in a much more kind of personality and society way. How do you guys view this, and what's your take on his being sentenced this week for contempt of court? And
as a friend of the court, they were the friend of the court.
Curious, what amici curiae? What is it called? Yeah. Amicus curiae. What is? I can't remember how you say it. There we are. What do you think of that?
Yeah. Well, look, the decision has been welcomed from our perspective. I think it's very hard to look at the judgment and be dissatisfied with the statement of the statement of how important the rule of law is in South Africa, and particularly the orders of the Constitutional Court. So there was a very, very, very strong statement that the orders of courts in general need to be obeyed, but also the Constitutional Court in particular. There's something particularly harmful about a powerful person like a former president being able to just turn his nose up at the orders of the court, and the majority, at least, was unequivocal in how dangerous that was, and you can only welcome that statement if you are an organization like us who believes in the rule of law, and even in a time of crisis like this, we want to see those sorts of strong statements. We were admitted as amicus curiae, which is a friend of the court. Mm-hmm. We did that. We did that so that we could sort of give our own perspective on how the sentencing should work. So the commission had applied for a straightforward 2-year prison sentence. We thought that the court would benefit from at least considering an order to try get Mr. Zuma to testify. So our suggestion was to give a mandatory prison sentence as a minimum, and then try and craft some sort of creative way to get him to testify. Ultimately, the court went with a purely punitive order, and it's hard to disagree fundamentally with the reasoning. It's certainly not antithetical to our values, but we're glad the debate was had, because the value of Mr. Zuma's testimony didn't disappear the day he decided not to testify at the State Capture Commission.
So, Chris, I mean, I hate to go into the realm of speculation, but do you think, first of all, because I'm a little concerned that South Africans are celebrating this as a victory for justice and, an equal application of the law too soon? Certainly, it does show that the judiciary are not going to be pushed around at the level of the Constitutional Court, and that's good news, because we have heard almost unending and interminable complaints about how politicians seem to have the upper hand and are able to get judges to sway things their way. And we've heard all kinds of things about the independence of the judiciary being questioned. My worry is just, does this result in a practical because most South Africans are practical people, right? We're going to look at this, and a judgment's all good and well, and if it can't be applied, if it can't be executed, it doesn't really have the value that we're talking about now, does it? And can he, for example, can he thwart this order? Can he deliberately disobey it and become a fugitive? Can he become like the medical parole Sheikh Shabir person that we joke and make fun of to this very day? What are the actual applications of this now? And I know that some of this is speculative on any of our parts, but what happens from here?
Yeah,
the order's been granted, but so what?
Agree. Yeah. So the legal question has been answered, and I think that's where the rallying and the celebration has centered around. Legally, we've got this bold statement, and the judiciary has certainly made its voice clear. It's now handed off the problem essentially to other arms of government. The arms of government do work together, so it's not an abdication of responsibility. But if Mr. Zuma doesn't present himself voluntarily, the Minister of the Police and the head of SAPS are going to have to effect the arrest. So you are correct that there's an extra step in this before it becomes truly worthy of celebration. There perhaps practical loopholes or practical ways that Mr. Zuma could thwart the implementation. But given the fact that the Minister of Police has to do something as well, there could be a political will issue. The sort of crisis that would follow that, I think, would be much more fundamental than the crisis we've just gone through, though. So it would take a pessimism that certainly I haven't yet felt to see government not stepping up in this in the execution of this order. But you are correct; it has to be followed through cleanly, executed cleanly, if this is going to be a proper victory for the rule of law.
Chris,
Pums, you go ahead, because I know you have many questions. I also want to think just a little bit about the political implications of this and how this does tend to put South Africans into two camps again, and then by no means equal in size. But Phumi, you start with your questions. I'm not going to butt in.
Chris, I'm very interested to hear why, before this judgment and even before the hearing at the Constitutional Court, there was lots of talk around why this is a constitutional matter. So why is this matter at the Constitutional Court? Why isn't it being dealt with through the lower courts, the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and Hana?
Yeah. So that was a key part of the judgment that was delivered yesterday, and that was certainly an option available to the Secretary of the State Capture Commission. He could have gone to the ordinary courts. There were criminal complaints laid that were sort of sat on, so there may have been a practical sense that other avenues were not exactly going to be as efficient. There was also the danger, and very, very present danger in this case, that Mr. Zuma would employ Stalingrad tactics and try and stall this case as it worked its way up through the lower courts. That's clearly a strategy that's been taken thus far in other matters. So beginning below the Constitutional Court ran a fundamental risk of this proceeding, of this contempt proceeding, lasting much longer than it should have. Remember, urgency was quite an important part of this case, for two reasons. The State Capture Commission was coming to an end, and for every day that Mr. Zuma was in contempt of court and defiantly refused to answer the merits of that contempt, the moral authority of the judiciary was going to be in question. Every day, ordinary South Africans were looking at Mr. Zuma's example, saying, "Well, if a powerful person like this can weasel his way out of a court order, perhaps I can do it as well." And I think putting the matter through the ordinary course would have just prolonged that, maybe for 4 years, let alone weeks or months. And I think the weeks and months that this has dragged on has been damaging enough.
And your view on the minority judgment?
Well, the minority judgments were interesting. They certainly present a political inconvenience, because Mr. Zuma's supporters are going to be reading that minority with a very, very, very close eye and looking at some of the statements made therein. the background to that, it's quite an interesting debate, because what you find in the minority is a criticism of the way Mr. Zuma's fair trial rights were treated by the majority, and it would help to have just a short understanding of how these contempt proceedings work. So the dispute that started all this was Mr. Zuma's failure to obey a subpoena from the State Capture Commission, and that basically set in motion like a private dispute between Mr. Zuma and the State Capture Commission. Contempt proceedings are a hybrid of civil and criminal. So once a person is charged with contempt of court, the purpose is generally to try and enforce that underlying civil wrong, to get him to obey the subpoena. Once a court has ordered him to do that, and he disobeys that court, which happened several months ago with that constitutional court order, there is now a separate wrong, which is the disobedience of the court order itself. And that's viewed as a harm against the public, worth criminalizing, sorry. Now, most of the time when you disobey a court order telling you to go and obey a subpoena, the remedy is somewhat coercive. It tries to get you to actually do what you're supposed to do. In this case, it was clear Mr. Zuma was never going to do that. The commission didn't even try and ask to get him to go back they gave up. Perhaps rightly so. That was a view shared by many reasonable people. But what that meant was the character of this dispute became a little bit more like a criminal trial than a civil trial, because we gave up on the civil part. The majority was comfortable with giving him the prison sentence because the protections afforded to him by the process was robust enough, in their view, particularly the letter that was sent to Mr. Zuma. So remember, the Chief Justice surprised us all with a letter to Mr. Zuma after the hearing, asking him for his opinion on his sanction if he's found guilty. That was quite an extraordinary step, but it was part of a process to give Mr. Zuma the sort of fair opportunity that was demanded by the unique character of these contempt proceedings. Now, the minority basically said, well, let's take the majority on their word. Mm-hmm. It's pointless to try get Mr. Zuma to go to the commission. So the criminal aspect of this trial, the criminal character, is actually more implicated than you think. And therefore, Mr. Zuma deserved more protections than were afforded to him. So the debate is not on its face absurd. It is an interesting question, exactly the character of these proceedings and what they demanded from in terms of Mr. Zuma's rights. Now, I think it's very easy to say in response to the minority that their anxieties were somewhat exaggerated. This was not a case where Mr. Zuma was robbed of any opportunity to give his case. The minority seemed to think he deserved the full suite of criminal protections, which is quite a robust set of protections that really don't seem to give him much more than what he got in this case. He got quite a decent set. So really, one's assessment of the minority will hinge on whether you think that Mr. Zuma got enough of the rights that he would have got if he wasn't accused in an ordinary criminal trial.
Which ironically tells you also that those people are accepting that he is criminal then, and therefore that is the reason that he deserves. What are those protections? Just by the way, many of us may be listening now thinking, well, what are the suite of protections? And I mean, this is a great moment, an instructive moment for us to remember that the purpose of the law is actually to protect individuals from the state's excesses and procedures that are unfair. And even if those individuals are loathed and despised or are universally blamed for all the horrors of the last 100 years, let's say in this case 10 years, they still deserve those rights in a country which recognizes them. So that's important. The law is actually there to protect you and me. Otherwise, there's no point in having the law. It's not there as an organ of state to effectuate state largesse and state bullying.
My favorite phrase of the use of the law is that it's there to protect the weakest and the worst of us. That is always,
In this case, what protections did the minority say that he might have deserved that he didn't get?
Well, that's interesting. So that'll be that's in the analysis. That's really going to be where one figures out where the minority and the majority differ on this. And they point out a couple things. They point out the fact that he didn't get a right to appeal because because the commission sought direct access to the constitutional court, the highest court in the land. There was no right to appeal. There's no court above this court. There's no adversarial process, which means essentially you've got two lawyers arguing with one another in an open court about why this conviction should be had. This was brought urgently. Section 35 of this Fair Trial Right says you should have time to defend yourself. There was no formal plea that Mr. Zuma could have entered. He didn't receive the protection of presumption of innocence. There's a range. It goes from A all the way to O in the alphabet. But those are the key ones that the minority pointed out.
Now, go ahead.
And you really have to ask yourself, did he not get that in substance? So the ordinary process by which this was brought, it's not like if you think of a normal criminal trial, it's close to what you see in the movies. There's someone sitting in the dock, there are witnesses, there are people in open court leading evidence. The process that happened here was what they called the motion proceeding. So they proceed by way of papers. So everyone submits the case on paper.
Mm-hmm.
And that process isn't devoid of fairness. You set out the facts. It's a way of leading evidence. And the applicant will go first, but the responding party gets a chance to respond on the papers. You get to challenge the facts.
Now, Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but it's always awful to ask a lawyer what they think of another lawyer's performance. But do you think his legal team did him a disservice by being as combative as they were with the commission? We saw some of the communications between, Judge Zondo or Judge Zondo's secretary in that case, the commission, and Jacob Zuma's legal team, and it didn't seem that they were going to brook any kind of I suppose you could say conciliation in this situation. They were not prepared to make any to create any space for the commission to be able to give him a soft kid glove treatment or to be able to exact from him the answers that they require in a much more civil way. It seemed they were combative and aggressive from the beginning. Do you think that made the court more likely to grant the sort of sentence that they have in this case?
I think so. The judgment is replete with criticisms of Mr. Zuma's disrespect and his uncooperation with both the court and the commission. I think it was definitely something that was a strategy pursued only by someone who was trying to avoid something very serious. I don't think one would have taken that strategy unless there was something quite serious to avoid. If he had been more cooperative, that would certainly have changed the course of events. It could, if he went before the commission, if he even filed papers. The extent of Mr. Zuma's turning his back on the court was so severe. He didn't even file a defense, which is something quite extraordinary. People don't do that.
Do you think that there's still room for a political solution?
Well, I don't. a political solution can't place aside the court order, if that's what you mean. Whatever political solution follows from this has to be in line with the court order. So the political solution has to be compatible with Mr. Zuma being in jail for 15 months. I can't say confidently what the political solution would be.
What would it look like, Phumi, if you could figure it out for us? I mean, the fact is there are lots of people who support Jacob Zuma. I don't think there are a majority of people, but there are a number of people who will see this sentence as, oh, I told you that the system was aligned against our man. I told you that he was right to avoid responsibility here because they're in some way not, they don't have jurisdiction to rule on matters that are political like this. What do you think a political solution would look like? And does this have the potential of turning him into a martyr?
Look, I don't know if it's got the potential of turning him into a martyr. I think a lot of the goodwill that he had with a lot of people has been eroded over the past couple of months. And people have gotten, except for Carl D. House, people have kind of gotten bored with him and his playing victim all the time. Right. And you see it in the number of people that are still showing up outside. Unlike Ace Magashule, he's not paying busloads of people to show up at court in front for him. Right. So that has been eroded. It's become less and less over the time. But I also think I've always thought that there could have been a political solution to this entire thing, even before it got to where it is now. And I think about Putin and Yeltsin or Nixon in America. The president should have arrived into the seat and finished this, closed it off, so that his entire presidency is not always talking about the past president. And he failed to do that then. And I don't know if he still has an opportunity now going forward to do something of that nature. I mean, I saw Ronald Lamola, I think, tweeting a thing about the president. It is still the president's prerogative to pardon. He can give a presidential pardon. And I don't know if he can still do that now, because I think that the horse has bolted. He should have done it up front. He should have just said to him, listen, guy, I'm going to give you a pardon. Just show up to this thing. Tell them what you're going to tell them. He could have done that.
Richard Spoor, who's been very vocal on Twitter on all of this, said Jacob Zuma deserves a pardon. He's 78 years old, has been poorly advised, mainly by people who sought only to exploit him for their own ends. 15 months in prison is like a death sentence for someone like him. It is very harsh. Cyril must act. That's coming from a quarter we didn't expect it to come from. Yeah, Chris, do you have any final comments on this before I let you go and do the good work of the Helen Suzman Foundation?
Well, look, I think the political point is probably the right tone on which to end this, because I think the legal battles sensibly now should come to an end, and government now has to come up with the solution. It's going to be a very interesting. What is it? We've gone 2 days from the judgment, so we're 2 calendar days down, 3 more until the minister has to do something, and I think that we can galvanize around this judgment. I think it's perfectly possible that Mr. Zuma's camp can galvanize as well, but you can be galvanized and isolated at the same time. So I think this is an important moment for South Africa, and it's a bold judgment, and the bold statements I think should give us a renewed commitment to constitutional democracy.
Well, I haven't had anyone from the Helen Suzman Foundation on the show for a long time, and really, you guys do sterling work, yeoman's work in South Africa in terms of bringing a number of non-government organization issues to the front of the public consciousness, and you fight quietly behind the scenes too for individual rights and for equality before the law. It's really, really important. Thank you for the good work that you guys do.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you, Chris. Very nice to have Chris on the show this morning. That's Chris Fisher from the Helen Suzman Foundation. Well, Pums, I mean, it could give his legacy, ironically, some patina of respectability again, because going to jail in this country used to be associated with, political prison with crimes against the state and illegitimate state. I'm not saying that that's the case here. I don't think that this will help Jacob Zuma. It must be a horrible experience for any man in his 70s, late 70s, to be going through. But
which is why I was making the point about Bill Cosby being 83.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? I mean, this guy, he just doesn't seem, he's like Teflon. Nothing seems to affect him.
Yeah, so then jail won't affect him either.
Quite probably. Let's bring in, because I know he's always got things to say about this, and we can never have him on the burning platform enough. People love it when he's on too. Gabriel Crouse, who's written a really interesting article I'll tell you about in a moment. There's a great campaign on the go called "Racism is Not the Problem." We'll find out about that in a moment. But he's the head of campaign, senior analyst at the Institute of Race Relations. So, Gabriel, what do you make of the Jacob Zuma situation? What's your feeling on this, and what does the IRR say publicly about it?
Well, my sense is that this is just about the greatest victory for racism is not the problem. Jacob Zuma should have gone to jail a long time ago before he became president. But there was a problem. And the problem was that his accusers were racist. Bulelani Nguka, the chief prosecutor who took down Shabir Sheikh, was accused of being Impimpi, apartheid spy number RS452, I think it was. The third force was behind all kinds of allegations against Zuma, and his supporters said this is unacceptable. In the political sphere, you can't criticize Zuma. If you do, you are exhibiting some form of racial prejudice. That line was then carried through into the mainstream media. Peter Bruce, Stephen Friedman, the late Karima Brown, a host of others, Jacques Rousseau, they all said in 2009, when the DA's campaign was Stop Zuma, Stop Corruption, speaking to the political solution, when it would have mattered most, that this is basically racist and you can't endorse the DA on this basis. So when racism was the problem, Zuma was kept in power. That was the solution to the problem. And finally, an allegation was brought where no one said racism is the problem here. Whatever the disagreements are about the merits of forcing someone to go to jail after they have refused a court order from the Constitutional Court, no one is in two minds about the fact that race is not the problem. And what happens when race is not the problem? We get a little bit of move forward. We saw a similar thing with William Kize, with Ace Magashule. When South Africans finally drop the sort of silly racial narrative, we seem to get some consequences. And this is the heart of the movement of this IRR initiative, is to get real about our problems.
All right, I'll talk about that initiative in a moment, but there are quite a few jarring things going on at the moment. Someone posted something on social media yesterday, and it was sent to me, and I thought it was such an interesting take on everything. So here we are, we're in a country where we're dealing with a third wave. There are lots of people being hospitalized. No one doubts that this disease hasn't had a serious impact. The lockdowns perhaps have had an even more serious impact on our country. We're at level 4 again. We have a health minister who's been placed on special leave. The health minister who was in charge of our vaccine rollout, of our COVID reaction, all of that stuff, he's on special leave for corruption. We have a deputy president who is currently in Russia seeking treatment for some disease that we've never been told about, even though we're paying for it. We're not paying for the disease, we're paying for the treatment. We don't know what's going on there. Didi Mabuza is nowhere to be found, and it's all being kept very hush-hush. Nobody knows what's actually happening there. Our actual president, who's a billionaire, keeps telling South Africans that we have to make endless sacrifices to fight this disease, even though it seems that he and his political friends are making absolutely no sacrifices in this respect. This is a very strange situation for us to find ourselves in a country. Someone made the point also about Jacob Zuma, that this is the only country where you can go from prisoner to president, in Mandela's case, and then from president to prisoner, in Zuma's case. So in some ways, we are really an outlier.
Yeah, I think that's true. Especially with lockdowns, we had the world's longest lockdown. We probably had the world's most irrational lockdown, the banning on bikinis and open-toed shoes and e-commerce and cigarettes, and the liquor bans are sometimes reasonable, sometimes very odd. I think now is one of those cases.
Let's call it capricious.
Very capricious, very whimsical. And yet the best evidence is that we spread the virus faster than anywhere else in the world. Discoveries
for the beta version of this virus anyway. It seems that they're calling it the South African variant, regardless of how nasty that is. We couldn't call this the Wuhan virus, but we can call it the South African variant.
Indeed. And if you look at Discovery's latest estimates, it's that about more than 62% of the country has already been infected, which means basically that it should be much easier to control the spread here than anywhere else, because it's as if 62% have been vaccinated. It's as if we have a very high vaccination rate. We saw a report in the Rapport newspaper, which I think really is excellent, a couple of weeks ago, that the Russians had offered 15 million vials of Sputnik V to be delivered between March and May for free. That was refused on what I take to be spurious medical arguments. At the same time as refusing free vaccines, the government has blamed vaccine apartheid for the failure of the vaccine rollout to meet any kind of international standard. Of course, many African countries have outcompeted us in this regard, even those with much lower GDPs per capita. So we've sort of failed on every account. And I think that one of the tragedies about this is that several thousand people have at this stage certainly died as a result of government inaction. And the question then becomes, will there be political consequences for this? And one reason to doubt that there will is because of the level of, at times, just incompetent reporting on the case. Here's an interesting example. A study by a government-backed medical association was initiated in October last year, a seroprevalence study, to figure out exactly how many people have had the virus. Iceland was the first to do this. It's happened in Germany, America, and so on. This started in October, then carried through December. Somewhere around January, it was paused. In February, it was announced that it was reopening. In fact, it wasn't announced. I phoned the head of the institute, and he told me, and we reported on that. And that field work has just been completed, and we're still waiting for the results. So this is going to turn out to be an 8-month seroprevalence study, which kind of undermines its effectiveness, because the whole point of a seroprevalence study is that you take a snapshot of the country at a time. And rather than estimate like Discovery does, which is reasonable, you actually test tens of thousands of people. I mean, I think it's 180,000 people being tested overall. You test them within a short window to see how many people have the virus at this stage, and you use that to inform your lockdown response. You use it to inform your decisions about vaccination. That study has been completely bungled effectively by taking so long to complete, and we still don't have the results. So we didn't go into the third wave knowing where we have the highest seroprevalence, where we can concentrate vaccination. No one even seems to be talking about vaccinating the immuno-naive, people who've never been infected, who are the most vulnerable. We instead seem to be vaccinating as many people that have already had it and therefore don't get much boost from the vaccines as those who haven't. And that puts us, it's like we're in this dire situation, and yet we're going to make 500 million vaccines for the World Health Organization, which is going to make us a bit of money. So thousands and thousands of people have died because we've dragged our feet, but we will make a little bit of money.
Yeah, what I found so ridiculous is that they're trotting out that whole flatten the curve line again, which was a lie in the beginning and is being used as a lie again in this case. This has been absolute flat-footed incompetence on the part of South Africa's government, our health department, and anybody who's been charged with the responsibility of trying to care about ordinary South Africans and their lives. There is no doubt about it that there must be consequences. And if those consequences aren't going to be political, then they ought as well to be criminal. I think many South Africans probably feel that way, especially those people who've had to bury their loved ones at funerals that have been capped at 50 people or even less. Some people who haven't even been able to say goodbye to their loved ones as they've passed away from this horrible disease because of stupid and, again, capricious rules brought by this government. There's a serious element to this, which people who are justifiably feeling virus fatigue are starting to cast a dim view of. But I think most of us, even those of us who are sick to death of hearing about coronavirus, I count myself among them, realize that there is a very serious problem going in. There's a very serious problem happening. There's no solution proposed. And the people who are charged with this responsibility are completely useless at dealing with anything to do with it.
Yeah, no lies detected, Gareth. I think that I really think there's a strong case to be made that South Africa has had the worst response in the world. We don't have the worst deaths per capita, but if you look at an age-adjusted assessment, because coronavirus does still have this sort of asymmetric age effect, then it does start looking like we have one of the world's worst. And if you combine that with our economic contraction, if you combine that with the undermining of faith in the rule of law through murders. Collins Khoza, Sibusisa Amos, Petrus Michels, 50 others just in the first few weeks of lockdown. You combine that with undermining the faith in science, very strange kind of imprimatura coming from our command council's scientific advisors.
Council, yeah.
And so when they give bad advice, this means that people stop. Unfortunately, there's a tendency to confuse science with the scientists in charge. So the scientists in charge make a mistake or say something that's very silly. And then some people just think, okay, well, science is bad. And let's go back to having ivermectin with cream soda. Like, I think ivermectin, there's some very strong evidence that it's a really good idea. But this sort of bush school logic that I've come across visiting some farms in the Free State is really coming out of a place of very medieval kind of skepticism about the ability of the empirical method to give us good stuff. So this undermines the body politic, and with the 1.3 million jobs undermining the economy, I think that the scars that have been sort of torn into the fabric of our society are going to live with us, those of us lucky enough to survive, for many years.
What do you say to that, Pums? I mean, do you believe that there's any defense for what Gabriel and I are saying here about governments dealing with this coronavirus? I had a chat with a friend yesterday. I don't want to place all this responsibility on poor Phumi. And she said to me, you know what? It's wrong to blame the government. You can't blame them. This is a virus. You can't control it. But there are ways that certain governments have responded to it that I believe are better than the way that our government has.
And that's fine. I think the one thing that all of us as South Africans know is that our government keeps letting us down. And so it's important to ask yourself what it is that you are doing to keep yourself and your family as safe as you can. Earlier when we started the show, that's what we spoke about. And it's all got to be about personal responsibility. It's got to be about personal responsibility, so sign up when your turn comes, hope to get the vaccine. But in the meantime, be responsible. Do what you need to do to keep yourself safe and your family safe. Our government has let us down, has been letting us down for many, many, many years. I don't know why anybody would suddenly think that in the face of everything that's happening now, suddenly, by some magical wave of the wand, they're going to become better.
Brilliant.
Come on.
All right. I think Pumi's point on personal responsibility is exactly right. I just want to not let the private sector off the hook, because I think a lot of it has been government failure. A lot of it's been private sector failure. I started this year, New Year's Day and New Year's Eve, I really wanted to be having a party and a hangover, but instead I was furiously reading medical journals and beginning a lobby, helping to begin together with my colleagues in the IRR, a lobby to get the private sector involved with procuring vaccines, because it was clear at that stage the government had missed several deadlines, had then lied about even missing the deadlines, that we needed to widen the pipe of flow of vaccines into this country. And the private sector, we had international vaccine producers from the West, if you don't like Sputnik V, who were willing to sell to the private sector. They gave us that assurance. They said, just as long as they really call for it, we will go forward with it. And Brazil gave a nice example earlier in the year where the national government had said, no, you can't go about any system other than through national government. And a provincial leader who was critical of Bolsonaro, he made vaccines and acquired vaccines and started injecting people and said, stop, you can jail me now for saving people's lives, and let's see what that does for you politically. Discovery could have done that. The other major pharmaceuticals could have done that. They could have applied real pressure. And instead, they kind of sat on their hands. And we lobbied hard January, February, March, because that's the time that we needed to get these vaccines in order to save lives in the third wave. And instead of joining the call, we got a lot of pushback. And by May, June, July, we started seeing more people from the major corporates saying, oh, it'd be really nice if you guys let us buy the vaccines. Too little, too late. And really, when you combine that with a kind of semi-tolerant attitude to nationalizing healthcare, basically saying the problem with our healthcare is the government's not running enough of it.
Guys, people
I
are
think
making money. People
the
are
private
making
sector,
money.
exactly.
People are making money. And so and this is why, for me, personal responsibility trumps everything, because everybody is taking care of themselves. So, it's very difficult for a lot of people in the private sector who do rely on huge government contracts to go against the government. So they're not going to go against the government because that's their client.
This is what I find so spineless and weak-willed about them too, and it's good that we make time in the Burning Platform to attack the corporations who many people justifiably do not see as their friends. First of all, because, as Phumi says, they're making money, but second of all, because government are always holding this sword of Damocles over them, saying we're going to nationalize healthcare anyway, and they're trying to sort of negotiate as if they've got an equal representation in the room. They're trying to kind of be government's friend when it suits them, trying to show that they're not the enemy. And this is not a great strategy, because all that government already don't care what you bring to the table. They're not interested in that. They have a plan, and we've seen that they're willing to implement that plan, regardless of how much damage it does.
Yeah, no, my colleague, Dr. Anthea Jeffrey, made representations to Parliament about the National Health Insurance Bill last week, and we watched that sort of hour-and-a-half long representation. It was fascinating. It was also terrifying to watch the previous representations that had come from major corporates, and their legal representatives basically were making the argument that this is going to happen, and we'd like our slice of the pie. So we're not going to stop you. We really like this, but could we make a little bit more money out of it?
Yeah, correct. They've already abdicated any kind of in the fight. You know,
so
what?
Helping yourself, just to make this practical, if you want to help yourself, and I think Pumi's dead right, one thing you can do if you're a client, you can call up your health insurer, you can call up your hospital, and you can say, really? Can you do something about this? Can you change your tune?
Yeah, I think that if we all bring pressure on these people are calling around asking for business now because it's been a tough year even for them. So if someone approaches you and says, hey, where's your medical aid? Do you want to change? Say to them, well, what was your position on national healthcare? And you want to speak to the CEO and you want to put pressure on those people and write your letters and do the things that we ordinary small folk can do. And your money, put your money where it counts.
Speak to the manager. Speak to the manager.
Yeah, be a Karen. I can't believe I'm actually advocating this, but be a Karen about this, because it's the only way that these big health schemes will start to take notice. So
be a citizen. Take charge.
I'm going to change tack here, because one of the things that constantly comes up in South Africa, we never have enough time to talk about it, even though so much of it is really just emotional and it's attached to our history. And we have every reason in this country to be extremely prickly about race. But you guys have launched this campaign, the Racism is Not the Problem campaign. Now, I've seen a couple of billboards. I've seen a bit of social media activity. Explain to us what it is. And more especially, I saw your article this week about the questions that you've asked prominent South Africans about race and about the oppressed and the oppressor. And what you've discovered about this, because I think this is quite good news. This is quite heartening stuff for those many, many South Africans who are in a practical war to survive at the moment. They're not really particularly interested in ideology or in identity to the degree that the politicians are. Tell us the story.
Yeah, so to start out with this in a way, this campaign from my personal side started when I was a small child, and there was a fight between some neighbors in Yeovil, which was the first rainbow kind of suburb in Joburg, one of the first in Johannesburg in the 90s. And we figured out as naughty people, as gossipers, that what had happened is there was an allegation of infidelity. So I went to one of my friends and I said, the reason they were shouting at each other at the party was because the wife was jealous that the husband was maybe sleeping with the other guy's daughter.
Ooh.
He said, what? You're saying, but racism was the problem. I'm saying, no, racism wasn't the problem here. It was infidelity. And he's like, but how can you say there was no problem? And that moment stuck with me, because I saw it happen again and again. When it turns out racism is not the problem, South Africans are so used to hearing that racism is the root cause analysis of all terrible things. Then they think you're saying, no, there's no problem at all. So in a way, this is a good news story, right? We asked South Africans, we asked a demographically representative sample of South Africans across all nine provinces, 80% black, 10% Indian, colored, 10% white, 10%, 5% Indian. We asked them, have you personally experienced any racism in the last 5 years? 80% said no. That is unthinkable when I was a child. It really is very good news. We asked people, is racism, what are the major problems in the country? 3% identified racism, 95% had bigger fish to fry, like unemployment.
Let's just say we have to always put these caveats in. That is not to say that there isn't still racism. I think everybody acknowledges that there are always going to be shitty racist people. There's always going to be shitty evidence of racism and bad behavior from certain quarters. Those people are probably not going to change. And I think it was Oprah Winfrey who said maybe a generation has to die out before we solve this problem. However, we must take stock of the fact that we've come a long way, especially in a country where this stuff was not only a matter of individuals being racist to each other, but the state itself was an organ for discrimination.
So this is exactly right. And a big part of this is saying, look, it's good news, but it's also really bad news. You need to think that when you hear racism is not the national problem that it's made out to be, and most people agree in our polling that politicians talk up racism and colonialism to excuse their own failures. So they know that it's being exaggerated. That doesn't mean we don't have problems. This is also a very serious campaign to get real about our problems. Now, one of the problems is, in our view, race-based policy. And we ask South Africans directly, do you think that just more jobs and better education will evaporate the inequalities between races? A supermajority said yes. So a supermajority agree that we can get where we want to be without race-based law. We then asked, are you for a voucher system for education, for health, for housing? Now, a voucher system is basically, we say the government's really good at collecting taxes, really bad at spending. So instead of the government administering the school and the RDP housing building thing and the healthcare, you get a voucher that you can go and redeem at any private school. And there's lots of low-cost private schools in this country that have been growing and really outperforming government schools. If you want to send your kids there for 2,000 Rand a month, you don't pay, the government will pay. The same thing for the RDP house. You get the voucher, you hire whatever contractor you want to build a house, and you can build a much nicer one. We said, would you like that? And most people said yes. Then we asked, would you like that or more BEE? And 75% said no, we'd much rather have the voucher system than more BEE. The only exception was amongst white people, where 35% of white people said, no, I think I will personally benefit more from BEE than from a voucher system. So amongst Indians, coloreds, black people, it was like 80-20, and amongst white people, it was like 55-35. And I think that is a very telling result. And I can relate to that because I was privileged to get a scholarship to go to one of South Africa's elite private schools. And a lot of my peers that are white have done very well in the last 10 years, running BEE together companies, black and white kids together, whose parents were millionaires and billionaires, and they have been milking it. They've been doing very well for themselves, and good for them. But this is important, not just because the president has asked for a review of BEE. And one of the campaign initiatives that we've done is we've already sent 15 letters to prominent South Africans to ask whether they should qualify and their children should qualify as candidates for BEE. These are vice chancellors of universities, multimillionaires and billionaires, CEOs of companies. We will then be sending that letter out to every member of parliament and every member of cabinet, because I think that, there is something strange about time moving along. We are now at a time where people my age that went to Hilton and St. Stithians and St. John's, sons and daughters of billionaires and millionaires, people with great political connections, are still qualified as previously disadvantaged.
Which is ridiculous. Yeah.
I think it's an insult. I think it's also a great danger to the economic prospects of this country. And
who are these people you've asked about who are the disadvantaged and who are not? I mean, are there names we would recognize there? Give us a couple of those names, and tell us if you've got a response from any of them.
So far, we've got quite a few. We are considering this, and we'll get back to you soon. I'm not going to list all 15 names because it's too early in the morning for me to do that. But we've got, in terms of academics, we've got the Vice Chancellor of Wits, UCT, and Stellenbosch. In terms of capitalists, we've got the CEO of Telkom, of Signia, and of another company. We asked black and white people because we think it's interesting to.
Yeah, sure.
And Discovery, Adrian Gore. We asked several politicians. One of them was John Steenhuisen. We're keen to see whether he thinks he should qualify as disadvantaged because he didn't go to university, which is a little bit silly.
Pearl Tusi, interestingly enough. I mean,
and black coffee.
And black coffee. I'd like to see what these people answer. All of them, because some of these are South Africa's most spoiled people. They really are completely ensconced and cocooned in extraordinary comfort and success, and many of them have made their own way, and I applaud that. But do you still look at yourself as being previously disadvantaged, regardless of your current situation? And is that the only way to look at the lives of South Africans, whether or not you can consider yourself fortunate, privileged, or not?
And I think, look, here's one way of thinking about this. If it was the case that South Africans were mostly racist, if it was the case that even if you're a black multimillionaire, you still can't get a seat at the table at the Westcliff Hotel or the Sandton Cocktail Circuit. If it was the case that you couldn't vote, or, there were rich black people who came to visit South Africa during apartheid and would get a temporary honorary white status, but spat on if they went to the wrong bar, and there'd be no consequence for that. If that was still the case today, then I could see the argument for saying, look, even though I'm rich and powerful, I'm kind of still disadvantaged in this legal way, or by the fact that people are judging me. But the fact that our data shows that most South Africans, poor South Africans, middle-class South Africans, rich South Africans, are not experiencing racism on a daily basis. The fact that we have nominally, at least, equality before the law, these seem to indicate that there should be a different way of looking at things. One that is much more individually focused, that says you are disadvantaged insofar as you don't have access to a job. You don't have a great education because you were funneled through a terrible public school system. You can't get medicine because you can't even afford the taxi fare to get to the clinic. But people in that situation are disadvantaged. People
Gabriel,
who are... Please go ahead.
Are we not? Are you not falling into the same trap then, to say that this thing is not such a big problem, and yet here you are, having spent the better part of the past 15 minutes talking about nothing else?
Well, I asked the question. I'm to blame.
So here is a problem.
You know what I'm saying?
I hear you. So I think that I was trained in philosophy, so I like the word meta. There's a meta problem, right? Which is that most South Africans know what the problems are. Most South Africans know that unemployment, crime, corruption, poor service delivery, bad housing, bad education, these are the major problems. But we're not dealing with those problems. So there's a problem about dealing with the problems. And that problem is conversational. There's something about how we talk about our problems that gets in the way. And that's why I started with Jacob Zuma. We knew the problem with Jacob Zuma was that he was corrupt. We knew the problem was to do with the arms deal, was to do with the fact that he was supporting nefarious characters who were taking over the Secret Service, taking over SARS and so on. But it was difficult to talk about, and therefore difficult to get actual accountability, because as soon as people accused him of corruption, the pushback from a small minority was, you're just being racist, or you're just impimpi. So that is a meta problem. And that's where conversationally we feel we need to break it down.
But here you are in a position to start conversations, and in a position to drive conversations, and have the discussion framed in a particular way. And yet the choice that is being made is to frame this conversation around the fact that race is not a problem.
No, I never said it's not a problem. I never said race is not a problem. I said it's not the problem.
Okay, it's not the problem, right? And yet you choose to frame the entire conversation around the thing that is not the problem, rather than frame the conversation around the things that are the problem and how to solve them.
What did I say about the voucher system? If you can find another South African who gets prominent platforms, and I'm very privileged to get it, I'm very grateful to be here. If you can find another South African who's talking up the voucher system for education, please have them on the show as well. I'm talking about that. I talk about the lockdown situation because, as far as I can tell, I'm the journalist who spent the most effort researching seroprevalence and researching our ability or inability to get vaccines. The IRR was at the front of the campaign to try and get the private sector involved with acquiring vaccines. There are a lot of problems that we take very seriously and that we're driving an initiative to address. But Papuda is a bit of legislation, for example, on the table that is
with respect to both of you. I don't want us
like
to talk
BE plus.
I don't want us to talk about what we should and shouldn't talk about. This has come up. This has been half of the burning platform today, and I thought it deserved some attention. So if anyone's to blame for choosing the subject matter, it's me. I do want to know, though, what you think of the voucher system, what you think of the findings in this survey that's been done, whether you think that that's actually a good indication or estimation of how most South Africans feel. Because your feelings and your thoughts on this, I would be interested to know.
I think most South Africans know that they are let's start here. If you are a 10-year-old living in Nkandla today, the number of times that you are going to come across a white South African who will be racist to you are very, very few, minimum. But the number of times that you are going to come against a school with no proper toilets are very high. So that kid's problem is not going to be racism. That kid's problem is going to be, oh my God, there are no proper toilets at my school and no proper toilets at my house, right? So that for me is, it's not even something to, whether you are in Nkandla or whether you're in the middle of the Free State, or the problems are different for every part of this country, and depending on the experience that you are having, there are people who are having, as we said, there are people who are having problems where in their workplace they are being bullied very much along racial lines, and there's nothing they can do about it, right? We know that person's real problem is racism. But the fact for me that you have now done this research and you find these findings, and then the decision to write letters to people who are in positions of power and to further the conversation that says, do you think you're at disadvantage? Rather than saying, people are saying they want a voucher system for this kind of thing. It's you're choosing this particular way of looking at it rather than forwarding the positive findings that you have had that say people aren't interested in race. Don't tell us what you think about race. This is what the people want. How do we make this happen?
So I think that there's an economic point. And the economic point is that one of the reasons South Africa has had a shrinking wealth stock since before the plague is the BEE plus, right? BEE plus EWC plus NHI plus the move for prescribed assets. These moves, these policy moves, plus Papuda, which is really the worst legislation currently being tabled. These legislative moves are driven forward by a politics that is all about race. So rather than deal with accountability, when Zuma was replaced by Cyril Ramaphosa, the move was, okay, now let's pretend that the reason most South Africans are poor is because a handful of farmers are land thieves and they are oppressing everyone. And what we need to do is expropriate them without compensation. The result of that is to increase joblessness, to decrease investment, and to make this a harder place for ordinary South Africans to get ahead. So race is at the core of, unfortunately, the Tripartite Alliance plus the EFF's policy drive, and they hold a supermajority in Parliament. So we have to address that. Most South Africans know that racism is not the problem it's being out to be.
Yeah.
But if you don't address that, then you get worse policies, which make it harder to deal with the real situation. So we need to walk and chew at the same time, right? We need to say, look, racism is not the problem you're making it out to be, and these are the solutions that we want. And I think that BEE is a major policy problem. I think that ramifying BEE through Papuda, EWC, and so on will make the problem worse.
All right, we're already over time, Gabriel, but there is a question here from Eleutheria, and it may be something many people are asking. What is Papuda? It sounds revolting. Just give us an idea of what that is quickly, and we can wrap it up for this morning because we're out of time.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. So that is an anti-discrimination law currently on the books, and at the moment it says you may not discriminate on the basis of race, gender, religion, and so on. Now,
already the Constitution makes it impossible for people to do that and get away with it.
Yeah. And so Paput is just the legislation that gives effect to that. Now there's an amendment to that legislation which says you can't defend, the burden of proof is on you. If someone accuses you of being racist, you have to prove that you're not racist. And if this amendment goes through, you're not allowed to say, look, I can show you that I didn't intend to be racist. So Discovery is a nice example. At the end of last year, they a report came out showing that they had found a disproportionate number of black doctors to be fraudulent than white doctors. Now, their counter argument is, look, that's not because we're discriminating on the basis of race. We have this way of figuring out who's a fraudulent doctor, and it just turns out that this is the inequality of outcomes that we got. There we go. Under the new Papuda legislation, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what objective grounds you've been using. And not just that, you can't say we didn't intend to discriminate on the basis of race. If there is inequality of outcomes, then you are racist. In your synagogue, your mosque, or your church, if you don't have 80% black people, 10% colored people, 10% white people, 5% Indian people, then you're racist unless you show that you are sort of bringing people in on a quota basis. In your school, the same thing would hold. In your club, in your local quiz night thing. I mean, literally the current legislation, it sounds crazy. But I have spoken to some of the best legal minds in the country, and that is literally what's being tabled.
But surely unenforceable? You can't execute legislation that's as bizarre as this. I mean, it'd be very hard to police.
So I think what happens is that capricious, that word you introduced earlier, becomes the rule of the day. And it's the same thing with expropriation without compensation. It's unenforceable. But what you can do is then say, look, you guys need to turn another cheek, be nice to us, don't criticize us. If this business does come after us, if this prominent individual does come after us, then we will go after them and use this legislation in order to do it. So they won't go after everyone, but the chief rabbi, for example, has been writing very nasty things about the lockdown, very nasty things about government policies in general. Well, maybe the synagogue becomes a primary target for this kind of legislation, and you leave the nice church.
We give shitty politicians the opportunity to victimize individuals. All right, I'm going to have to call it off at this point. As much fun as it is hearing you and Phumi argue about what we should and shouldn't be arguing about, this has been very interesting. Meta. Yeah, I know. It's always meta. That's why I love having you two on. It is always fun on the Burning platform. Gabriel, thank you for bringing our attention to this very interesting survey and to your campaign. Phumi, as always, thank you very much. Your insights are always appreciated, and you can see it in the comments too. We will see you next week for the Burning platform and a brand new slate of points of view. Obviously, there'll be lots more stories, and just maybe we'll have a former president who's in jail. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. It could happen, and it could happen right here. Don't miss it next week. That is the Burning platform for today. It's brought to you by Nando's, and we will see you on Thursday next week. Thanks, Phumelele. Thank you, Gabriel. And most especially, thank you to you for being on the show with us this morning.